Hello and welcome to the monthly music mix for November and December 2023. We'll be covering all the singles and albums that I've listened to these past 2 months. Starting with the singles, we have Look Ma No Brains by Green Day. Look Ma No Brains is the second single from Green Day's upcoming album Saviors. This track is pretty fun and it has a pretty high energy throughout. The song isn't really the most complex thing ever, it's just kind of a short banger that's a little over 2 minutes long. I enjoyed this track and I'm giving it a light 8 out of 10. Next is I Care by Fabiana, Palladino, and J. Paul. I Care is the latest track by Fabiana Palladino featuring Paul Institute founder J. Paul. The song has Jay's notorious production, which sounds fantastic as always. Fabiana's vocals on the song are great. J. Paul's sound in the second half is great as always. Overall, I enjoyed this track and I'm giving it a mid 8 out of 10. Now, onto the albums we have. The Fear of Fear by Spiritbox. The Fear of Fear is the latest EP by Spiritbox, following up their projects Rotoscope and Eternal Blue. This EP continues the trend that Spiritbox has had with their projects, being consistently good. Courtney's vocals are great as always, and their songs are catchy as always. Overall, I'm enjoying this EP, and I'm giving it a mid 8 out of 10. My favorite poem was Next is the Scrapyard EPs by Quadeca. The Scrapyard EPs are the latest release by Quadeca following his excellent album from last year. So far, we've gotten the first 3 of these projects, and they're all pretty good. The songs keep in line with his last record with great vocals and fantastic production throughout. However, the major difference with this project is there's no concept, which leads to a lowered usage of effects on the vocal, which in my opinion works really good on these songs, and I'm enjoying these EPs and I'm giving them each a 8 out of 10. Next is Zig by Poppy. Zig is the latest album by Poppy and follows her project Flux. Overall, this project is pretty mediocre throughout. I think the opener is pretty good, but that's contrasted by the track Zig, which I don't enjoy at all, and the rest just very mediocre. Not really return to this album as track X often, and with that in mind, I'm giving this a light 5 out of 10. Next is Blanket by Kevin Abstract. Blanket is the latest album by Kendrick Abstract and his first since the end of Brockhampton. Unlike his previous albums, which are rap albums, this is an indie rock project throughout. While this project isn't consistently great, there's a few pretty good tracks through this album. Overall, I think this project is a pretty solid one, and I'm giving it a mid 7 out of 10.
My dad can't get out of bed.
Next is The Maybe Men by AJR. The Maybe Men is the latest album by the heavily criticized AJR, and I personally think it's their best album yet. However, this album is still filled to the brim with issues. Obviously, there's a classic AJR issue of everything sounding overproduced and like garbage. I feel like there's multiple moments where if it wasn't for the production trying its hardest to piss me off, the tracks would be mediocre. However, the biggest issue with this album is the lyrics. This album is filled with some of the most annoying choruses of the year. Also, there's some lines like the Kendrick reference and Steve's Going to London and the line about sex and turning out part 3 that makes you question what they were thinking. I will say the track God Is Really Real is alright, but outside of that, you can just skip this album entirely because in my opinion, I think it's a light 2 out of 10. Next is Quaranta by Danny Brown. Quaranta is the latest and long-awaited album by Danny Brown, following You Know What I'm Saying, and is a spiritual successor to Triple X. This album does a really good job of being the version of Triple X for this point in Danny's career. This album has the great comedic lyricism of his previous work, while also having very down-to-earth bars such as the track Hanami. This album, production-wise, isn't as wild as some of Danny's previous albums, most notably Atrocity Exhibition. This album still has great production throughout, though. With this in mind, I'm really enjoying this album, and I'm giving it a high 9 out of 10. Next is New Blue Sun by André 3000. New Blue Sun is the debut solo album by André 3000, his first project since the release of Idlewild 17 years ago. Despite what some may have hoped for, this album is an entirely instrumental ambient album. However, I think this album is a great album to listen to and just vibe in its soundscapes as they are so lush and beautiful. Honestly, my only major complaint about this album is it runs a little too long, being almost an hour and a half long. But outside of this is a beautiful album, and I'm giving it a high 8 out of 10. Next is And Then You Pray For Me by Westside Gunn. And Then You Pray For Me is the latest album by Westside Gunn and a follow-up to his album Pray for Paris, and this project is very inconsistent. When this album is doing what Gunn has done before, it's great. However, there are multiple times where Gunn is on trap beats and it doesn't really work. Honestly, on parts of this album where Gunn is on trap beats, he sounds like the rapper Smiley and it's funny as hell. However, the moments of this album that work are great, and with this in mind, I'm giving this a light 6 out of 10.
We're not against rap. We're not against rappers. But we are.
Finally, we have 66689 Blvd Prequel by Kipp. 66689 Blvd Prequel is the latest album by rapper Kipp and is my first experience with his music. I only learned about this project really late into the year after seeing him live with model actress in The Armed. I really ended up enjoying his set and decided to check out his work afterwards. To start with the production on this album, it's really good and it's something I can just kind of vibe out to. There's also Kipp's flow throughout this record, which is consistently great. Also, this album has so many great choruses, such as the track 18 and The Hard Way. Overall, this project is pretty underrated, and I am giving it a high 8 out of 10. Finally, for some bonus recommendations, we have Of Jane Live by Converge, GNB by Goreshit, The Dusk and Us by Converge, Dark Skies by Fit for a King, Celebrity Therapist by the Callous Cowboys, World Is Yours by the Massive Fermenting Dregs, By the Time I Get to Phoenix by Injury Reserve, Francis and Me by the Mars Volta, and Wrong by No Means No. And with that in mind, that will be the end of this video, and I will see you in the next one.